Supplementary explanation. The sacrifice of atonement. In the Old Testament, just like the other sacrifices, the sacrifice of sanctification for all Israelites was offered in the tabernacle. The high priest cleaned himself and put on the holy linen garments instead of the usual formal dress for rituals, selected a young bull as a sin offering and a ram as a burnt offering for himself and his house. Leviticus chapter 16 verse 3-4. The high priest laid his hands on the head of the offerings to pass on yearly sins of his people. The laying on of hands was an essential part of the Day of Atonement. If it had not been performed, offering the sacrifice couldn't have been carried out because the atonement for sin could not be accomplished without the laying on of hands, thus passing the yearly sins of the Israelites onto the sin offering. In Leviticus chapter 16 verse 21, Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, confess over it all the iniquities of the children of Israel and all their transgressions concerning all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and shall send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a suitable man. He took 2 goats as sin offerings and a ram as a burnt offering from the people. Leviticus chapter 16 verse 5. Then he presented 2 goats before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle and cast lots to select the one for the Lord and the other to be the scapegoat. The one for the Lord was offered as a sin offering, and the scapegoat was offered alive before the Lord to atone for the yearly sins of the people of Israel and then put out into the wilderness. Leviticus chapter 16 verses 7-10. The sins of Israel had to be passed on to the scapegoat by the laying on of the hands of the high priest. Then the scapegoat, which took on itself all the sins of Israel, was put out into the wilderness for reconciliation between the people and God. Thus the yearly sins of Israel were washed away. In the New Testament, in the same way, Jesus Christ was baptized by John the Baptist, the laying on of hands in the Old Testament, and took away all the sins of the world as the sacrificial lamb to fulfill the salvation of God. Leviticus chapter 20 verse 22, Matthew chapter 3 verse 15, John chapter 1 verse 29 and 36. In the Old Testament, before the casting of lots, Aaron killed the young bull as a sin offering for himself and his house. Leviticus chapter 16 verse 11. Then he took a censer full of burning coals of fire from the altar before the Lord with his hands full of sweet incense, beaten flour, and took it beyond the veil. He then put the incense on the fire before the Lord, so that the cloud of incense might hover over the mercy seat. He also took some of the blood of the bull and sprinkled it with his finger on and before the mercy seat 7 times. Leviticus chapter 16 verses 12-19. On the Day of Atonement, the laying of Aaron's hands on the head of the offering should not be omitted. Aaron laid hands on the head of the goat and passed all the sins and all the iniquities of Israel onto its head. Then a suitable man took the goat into the wilderness and sent it forth. The scapegoat wandered in the wilderness with the sins of Israel and died for them in the end. This was the typical sacrifice of atonement in the Old Testament. It is the same in the New Testament, except the scapegoat was substituted by Jesus Christ, who took away all the sins of the world upon himself through his baptism, bled and died on the cross for us all. Therefore now, the salvation from all sins cannot be brought without the baptism and crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the heavenly high priest. This is the fulfillment of salvation of being born again of water and the Spirit.